This special edition, look, Super Bowl's in the books. Baseball Yolama, aka Eric Zimmerman, and we have our Fantasy Baseball Almanac and Draft Guide available now on Amazon. You can search for either Sean Ryan, SeanRyan. You can search for Functional Sportsaholic. You can search for Eric Zimmerman. All of them will take you, or you can just search for Fantasy Football Almanac on Amazon. It'll all take you there. If you're watching us on YouTube, just click the link below. We have that included. It'll take you directly to the book. So buy that thing. It's awesome. You get full season support. Eric, directly to the authors. It's me and Eric. We're still a boutique little fantasy football company and media company, so you actually get direct lines to us. We don't have a staff answering things, so you get everything right from what's that saying, Eric? Is it directly from the horse or the mouth of the horse or the horse's ass? I don't even know. What is it?
Right from the horse's mouth.
There you go. There you go. That's the one. I set them up, you knock them down. Right from the horse's mouth. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. But anyway, Eric, how you doing today, man?
I am doing well, my friend. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I got, as you know, Eric, I got passed over for a job that I kind of wanted, and then I found out who got the job, and I thought, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. It'd be like if you're a Major League Baseball player, like let's say you're Chris Bryant, right? And there's a draft and they're redrafting the whole league, and you're like, well, who went ahead of me? And then you find out it's Mike Trout. You're like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I could see that. I mean, yeah, there's humility in knowing who got the job. And so, yesterday when I found out I didn't get it, I was a little irked. Today I found out who got it, and I'm just like, yeah, okay. I would have done the same thing. So I feel pretty good about it. I'm actually in a really good mood today now, which is good. I've also had a lot of coffee. But today we're going to be talking about the National League West. Not West, I'm sorry, National League Central. So we're going to be talking, Cubs, Reds, Cardinals, Brewers, and the Pirates. Yes, we will be talking about the Pirates as well. Just kind of talking about hitters, pitchers, and then kind of the best and worst case scenario for each team. So, Eric, why don't we just start with the Chicago Cubs, if you're cool with that? And let me just say this. So, last year, now that they've won a World Series, right, there's some expectations, but you and I both kind of agreed prior to the 2019 season that we didn't think they had the horses. They have some good pieces. Don't get me wrong. I think they're going to definitely vie for the playoffs. But the Cardinals, I think, are pretty good. Obviously, the Brewers, there's some question marks this year, which we'll get to in a bit. They're pretty good. And the Reds, I think, are improving. I mean, this division is interesting. But why don't we talk about the Cubs? Who do you like, particularly as a hitter in the early rounds? Tell me about it.
As I was reviewing this to come in here, I started thinking, oh, the Cubs, they have a great offense. They're going to hit, they're going to do all this. And as I'm looking over it, and outside of, the usual suspects of Contreras, Rizzo, Baez, and Bryant, that is not that good of a lineup.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I mean, I know they made the move for some reason, Castellanos. They made a move for him late last season. Obviously, he's gone in the division, mind you. They do have a lot of question marks. And last year, the offense actually sputtered. I don't know that the pitching was so bad. Like I was looking at, we'll talk about him in a bit, Yu Darvish. And of course, we're preparing. Eric, you and me are in the same league. And last year, I took over an albatross of a team. And now I have it to the point where I think I can really, actually not even compete, but I actually think if I have a really good draft, I can really compete this year because I did enough work last year to fix that roster. And I'm looking over this team. I have Chris Bryant now, but I don't have the space to keep him, obviously, because my team is a lot better. Baez is interesting because in our league, I know in our almanac we have him, his availability at shortstop, second base, third base. In our league at this point, his availability is just shortstop, which to me kind of hurts him a little bit. I like versatility, especially with how shallow our bench is in our league. But what do you think about Baez this year? Do you think he can do better?
I still think there's room for him to get, somewhat better. I mean, it's tough for him to go, a whole lot higher than where he was last year just because he was outstanding. But yeah, there's still room to grow for him. Still fairly young at just 26. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like there. He's going to be nowhere near us in our draft. But if anyone gets a chance on him in the early rounds, absolutely jump on him. There's still a ton to like.
Yeah, so we're in a keeper league, and our rule is basically you keep every baseball league. It's so nuanced now. I mean, are you going to start a DH? How many utility players do you have? This and this and this and that. Well, in our league in particular, we have such a shallow bench. You have to use waivers, but you can't just continuously recycle. There's a cap on how many waivers pickups you have per week. And so, like, I'm looking, and of course, this time of year, it's before the draft, but our keeper stuff is open. Can we trade? I was thinking about trading for Baez, and when I saw his availability was down just to shortstop, I'm just like, that's too much of a premium. I already have Soto and I already have Bellinger as hitters on my roster. And, I have a bunch of pitchers who I like. One of which we'll probably be talking about in a little bit, and I know you like him too because you keep asking me to trade. I'm looking at him. Kyle Hendricks did really well. Let's move it over to the pitchers here. Kyle Hendricks did well last year. I remember your team was so stacked that you actually had to waive him last year. Somebody picked him up, and he finished the season pretty well. Yu Darvish was the guy that I thought was pretty interesting. Let me scroll down on my screen here. I have his stats up in a little bit. Yu Darvish is the guy that I look at his numbers, and the other guy, what's his name, Quintana as well, is kind of like this as well. I look at the ERA for Yu Darvish, 3.98, not the greatest in the world, but not awful in today's day and age, especially with the home run ball that we saw last year. Strikeouts per 9 is pretty decent. You look at the number of strikeouts he gets out of innings. That's what you want to see. But I felt like the offense was letting him down, and last year he finished, 6-8? Which you would expect those numbers on that team to be better. I feel like he's going to really take a step ahead this season because I think he's going to have more wins. But what do you think about that theory?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, his season was kind of up and down. He started out really, really rough, and people started to worry that the Cubs were just out of a huge chunk in investment what they gave him, a couple of years ago. And then he turned it around and really started to look like, what he was a couple of years back, and in the second half, and that kind of put a step forward for him. And I think he should be able to continue that. He's kind of finally gotten comfortable there. The wins, it's tough to say. The offense just completely scuffled outside of a couple of guys. But Darvish should be in for another nice season. It should be an improvement off of last year because he's not going to falter as much as he did in the first half, or at least he shouldn't.
Yeah, and I'm looking at Quintana. So he was a guy that last year in 2019, and here's what I do, because at least in our league, and again, all year, if you're in a category league, all this stuff, all formats are going to be different. But in our league, we are, in my opinion, very starting pitcher dominant, and that's something I didn't really put into context until I went through the draft. And a lot of what we do in our draft guide is we put a shameless plug for our draft guide. We look at things through tiers, and we think that the baseball draft guide, yes, we should give you, the statistical information. You should get all the analytics that you want to get, but we put it in context in terms of winning the draft, and then our in-season service all talks about how to win the season, right? Which waiver wire claims do you pick up? Because it is really a year-round thing. But one of the things I noticed last year in my return to fantasy baseball, because it had been a few years since I had played, is that there were a lot of good pitchers putting up good numbers, nice strikeouts per 9, nice ERA, that were just getting dogged by their team. And, I went through the first part of the year, like Zach Eflin, although he came back down to earth later in the year. Like Zach Eflin was like that. I was seeing all these guys with like crazy low ERA and nice strikeouts. I'm just like, come on, man. It's almost like if you go to Vegas and you're playing the roulette table and you see like 10 reds in a row, you're like, come on, black's got to hit at some point, And that's kind of how I feel about pitchers sometimes, is when you start the season slow, is it because your pitching is bad, or is it because you're just getting no support offensively? And I felt like that was the case with Quintana, although he did come back down to earth. I'm reading his ERA now, 4.68 ERA. I don't like that. I want to see that at least under 4 for my fantasy team. But what do you think about him coming back this year?
I wasn't a fan of him last year, and I'm even less so this year. I think I made it pretty clear last year when we talked that that was massive overpayment for what they gave up for him.
Sure.
And I think they're going to regret that trade horribly. But if they don't already.
Yeah.
If he's there in like the very, very tail end of the draft, I'd probably take a shot on him, but I wouldn't go any higher.
That's exactly what I'm saying, too. I'm not saying draft in the middle rounds. I'm thinking, if you're looking on flyers, and another theory, and it's funny because, again, Eric and I compete in the same league, but we write this almanac together. So we have no secrets from one another. There's no tactical advantage, although I always wonder, is Baseball Llama keeping something in reserve for himself? Is he dropping one guy a tier because he wants to get him in our keeper league? I don't know. I'm just kidding. I don't think he really does that. I hope not, anyway. because we're all about the reader here. But looking through the lineup, and I agree, Quintana. I would not take him early. I was thinking more late round flyer. And my general rule of thumb is if you're taking late round flyers, look for an unheralded guy on a team that should be good. I think you ended up with the Dodgers pitcher. What was it? Like Jin Ryu or something like that. You ended up with him, and I thought that was a great pickup, and I was kind of kicking myself about that one because it's like, for crying out loud, I mean, if you're going to take a pitcher, take the unheralded pitcher on a good team. Like I built a lot of my roster last year on kind of midline starters from the Houston Astros because I could count on the win. Maybe not great strikeout numbers, but at least I would get the win. Maybe not so much this year, right? Yeah. Let me ask you this. So the last starter, the fifth starter we have listed in the almanac here, I'll be honest with you, I don't know too much about him. Alec Mills, I can see his numbers, 2.75 ERA in limited action, 36 innings pitched, 10.5 strikeouts per nine, which I like to see. Whip, I'd like to see the whip a little bit lower if he's going to be dominant, but it's still pretty good at 1.16. What do you think about him? Does he have a chance to step out this year, or do you think the Cubs could still make a move before the season?
I'm not sure there's much left out there to make a move for. Right. They have some other guys. Adbert Alzolay is gonna probably compete with him for that spot, so it'll be an interesting spot. I think either one of them by the end of the year probably could be, probably a step above Quintana, and possibly even Lester the way he's trending. So they've got some options there, but as a whole, it's not a very inspiring rotation outside of Hendricks and Darvish.
And let's just move it now to relief pitchers. Kimbrel's got to step it up, right? I mean, he can't be as bad as he was, after his signing in June last year. He's got to be better, right? You would think so.
I mean, it can't be any worse.
That's true. It's true.
He got hit by the home run ball, which I think everyone did, but. You look at an ERA for a closer who's giving up, if he's throwing 100 miles an hour and he's not getting his movement because he didn't get a full spring training.
Right. And that's what I'm thinking. Like the spring training, it's almost like these closers, because there is a different mentality than starting a game. These closers are kind of like kickers in football to me. Is like you gotta go through your routine. Not saying anything, but they're more like prissy about their routine. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm saying like, when you're in that kind of mentality, you got to go through your routine, right? And I just not having that full spring training, that the longer holdout, the salary situation and all that, I think that affected him last year. I feel like he's a bounce back player, and I'm guessing you agree, Eric.
I do. I'd be a little hesitant just based on what we saw to go out and rush and grab him too early. Like you probably would have in years past. But he still should be one of the better closers unless he's just fallen off a cliff all of a sudden, which I can't see happening, at least not yet.
Sure. Now let's talk about, as we do, kind of like best case, worst case potential, maybe 10, 15 seconds on each. What do you think the high and low for the Cubs is?
I honestly think they're about the same for this team. I see them duking it out with, and I'll kind of get ahead of ourselves, but with Milwaukee for third or fourth place.
Third or fourth. Interesting.
I don't, barring a couple of moves to really, if they can find a sucker to take Hayward's contract off their hands or, find a way to add salary, which they're not going to do, which means they got to clear it first. They got to do something, and I think they've been looking at it all year, and they haven't done it yet. But a Chris Bryant trade makes sense to some degree if you can get a couple of major league ready pieces that can impact the roster. If you can turn one really good player into two very good players, it could work. It could help. It could boost their chances. But as they're constructed right now, I don't, barring a collapse by the teams that are going to finish in front of them, I just don't see how they get out of the third place max, fourth place